Hey, what's up everyone? My name is William and today we're going to be going over the distortion effects that are included in Logic Pro. So first of all, I've just opened up a new session here and I've set up a couple of audio tracks to go over each of the different effects. The first one does not have any of the effects on it, so we're going to listen to that one first. I'm using the Carla Lyric 02 sample. I got that just from Apple Loops, searching for vocals, and it's right here, Carla Lyric 02. So let's go right ahead and listen to what this sounds like without any of the distortion effects on it.
Get up, get up, get up, get up. Get up, get up. Oh.
Okay, so that's what it sounds like without any of the effects on it. And so next we're going to be going into the BITCRUSHER effect. This is the first distortion effect that we're going to be going over. To put this on your track, you just go to your audio effects, go down to distortion, and click BITCRUSHER. And it'll open up just like this. This is the factory default presets right here. I just clicked recall default just to make sure that we're on the same page. So this is what it looks like, when we start out. There's not much to this this effect. This is just a low resolution distortion effect. It's a BITCRUSHER. We have different modes and 4 knobs here, and that's basically it. We have this drive knob, which determines the input, the input gain to our signal. We also have resolution. It just determines the amount of bits that are in our sample. The lower the bits, the more distorted it will sound. Then we also have downsampling, which that just halves or reduces the sample rate that the sample is playing at. So at 1x, for a 44.1 sample, if we halved it, it's playing at half that. If we went all the way up to 10, we're playing essentially at 4.41 kilohertz now instead of 44.1 kilohertz. So that's what this is. This is just downsampling, and you can go up all the way to 40 times downsampling, which is quite a lot. The next thing I'm going to go over is, this mix knob right here just determines how much of the distortion effect is actually being applied to the signal, whether only half the effect or half the signal is being affected or the entire signal. That's what this knob controls. Then there's this clip level. This is like an output gain essentially. If you need to turn down or turn up the clip, you can do so there. The very last thing to go over in the BITCRUSHER is the different modes. And the default one is the clip mode, where it would just clips at the top when it peaks this line. But there's also fold options, which it folds the clip when it hits the threshold, and it also there's wrap, which it's just another mode. These are just different effects to get different sounds out of the BITCRUSHER. But let's just listen to what the factory default sounds like. I'm going to recall default again just to make sure we're on the same page. So let's just listen to what it sounds like with the factory default settings.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh.
You could start to hear some of the artifacts in that. And of course, definitely adjust this and mess with it as you please to experiment with some of these. But always be careful when working with distortion effects, because it tends to, like to play louder when you're messing with distortion effects. So make sure you have your volume turned down a little bit before you play it, just to make sure that you won't be ruining any speakers or anything like that. But that is the BITCRUSHER. There's not much to it. Just a few parameters. Very simple to use. I think that about sums up that. Next, we are going to be covering the clip distortion effect. So getting into the clip distortion effect, it looks similar in a way to the BITCRUSHER, but it's a little bit more complex. Starting over on the left side, we have an input gain knob and a drive knob. We have this display here that shows us the tone, which is controlling our high pass. We have this clip filter, which is controlling our first low pass. And then we also have this right here, which is controlling our symmetry, which symmetry just determines whether or not, asymmetrical distortion is being added to this clip distortion effect. Since the rest of it is symmetrical distortion, this allows us to add some asymmetrical distortion to our clip. Next, we have, of course, our mix, which again determines how much of the signal is being processed by the distortion effect. For the factory default, it was on 50%, so I'll just leave it there. Next, we have our next low pass filter, which this is just a basic low pass filter that we can adjust. We then have a high shelving area. We have a frequency knob and a gain knob for this high shelving area. This is kind of like EQing on our distortion effects. So if we put, everything above, say, 7.9 or 7,900 hertz, we could affect that. If we wanted to bump that up a little bit, we could do that. And next we have our output gain, which is just the output gain for our entire signal after it's gone through this effect. So let me just go to recall default and let's just listen to what this effect sounds like on our audio clip.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh.
It sounds very low pass, so I'm gonna bump this up.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh.
So you can get some cool distortion effects with this clip distortion. Just another way to distort your signal using this effect. Also, there's quite a few presets for this, so be sure to check some of those out. And again, if you're confused about any of this, make sure you ask your mentor about something and mention it to them. Moving on, though, we are next going to be going over our Distortion 1 effect. It's just called Distortion. We just went over to our distortion effects, and it's just called Distortion. Let me just load up this default. So next, we're going to be going over this distortion effect. So, going over the distortion effect, we have not very many parameters. This is actually quite simple, this distortion effect. We simply get a drive, and over here is just a visual representation of everything that's going on. We get a drive knob, we get a tone knob, which affects our low pass filter where it's cutting off, and then we also get this level compensation button. It just increases the perceived loudness of our audio file after the distortion's taking place, and of course we get an output knob. Mainly on this distortion effect, you're just going to be working with the drive and the tone. I'm going to turn it off real quick, and let's listen to the audio file without the effect and then with the effect, just to see the difference it makes.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh.
So that was without the effect. Now with.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up.
obviously there's quite a bit of distortion on that now with the distortion effect. This one's fairly simple though. Moving on to distortion 2, the next distortion effect. This one is also rather simple. And so when it comes to the distortion 2 effect, we get 3 knobs. We get the pre-gain knob, which determines the gain of the input signal. Then we get the drive knob, which determines the saturation we will add to the signal. And then we also get the tone knob, which determines the frequency of the high pass filter. The last thing about the distortion 2 is we get some different modes in order to get different styles of distortion. These are things for you to try out. There's a growl mode, which sounds like this.
Get up, get up.
There's a bitty mode.
Get up, get up.
Nasty.
Get up, get up.
Class AB soft.
Get up, get up.
And class AB hard.
Get up, get up.
So all different effects there. That's about it for the distortion 2 effect, though. It's very simple, just like the distortion 1 effect, but again, very useful. So moving on, we will be going over the overdrive effect next. And we can see when we're looking at the overdrive effect, it looks exactly the same as the distortion effect that we covered earlier, distortion 1. And they may look the same, but they're actually different. The difference being on the back end, though. Overdrive can produce a much smoother sounding distortion, but the parameters work the same as they did on the distortion effect. We have our drive, our tone, our output, and our level compensation, and we get this display here of what's going on. So let's listen to our audio file without the overdrive and then with.
Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Oh.
Now with.
Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Oh.
So we could hear the difference there. It's a little bit smoother than some of the other distortion effects, but that's about it for overdrive. It's the same thing as distortion when it comes to the parameters, just different on the back end of things. Moving on to the last distortion effect, and that would be phase distortion. So the phase distortion is a little bit more confusing than some of the other ones, in my opinion. Because the phase distortion, what happens is the input signal is actually manipulating the phase position of itself. It's using the delay line of this effect to adjust that and then give us the distorted signal. For example, if we had this delay at 0%, the signal would be clean.
Get up, get up.
That's just a quick explanation of what's going on. As far as parameters go, we get this monitor button, which monitors the actual signal that is manipulating our phasing.
Get up, get up. Get up.
It's actually just a low-pass version of our signal. Next, we have cutoff that you can visually see here, adjusts our filter, and then the resonance of that filter. Then we have intensity, which determines the intensity of the modulation that's happening to our signal. Then, of course, we also have this delay knob, which, as we play,
Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Get up, get up. Oh.
You can hear the differences that makes. the phase reverse button just reverses the phasing of the signal. And of course, as always, our mixing slider determines how much of the signal is being affected, whether 100% of the signal, 0%, or if it's a even mix between the two. So that's just something to keep in mind. I know that was a lot to cover in one video. Again, these are just, quick explanations of what's going on with some of these distortion effects, how to use them, just a general, what each knob does. If you have any trouble with any of this, just, feel free to go over some of the presets, play with some of the parameters yourself, ask your mentor. Definitely, learning these effects is, these are the tools you're using, you're going to be using to make, tracks and get effective with this DAW. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. My name is William. Thank you for watching.